In this video, we're going to discuss the official timeline for The Witcher Season 1, which confused so many people, and we'll find out. The secret of why it was so confusing was the writers at Netflix are still confused to this very day. The official Netflix timeline for The Witcher has major errors in it, which we will point out in this video. Subscribe to this channel where we cover medieval fantasy TV and give tips and tricks for The Witcher games. On January 7th, 2020, a Twitter handle from Netflix released the official Netflix timeline for The Witcher. That timeline listed 3 dates, 12/10, 12/49, and 12/63, and placed 15 scenes in the series in order and labeled them by whether the main characters CIri, Yennefer, or Geralt of Rivia showed up in that scene. Unfortunately, 2 of the 3 dates were inconsistent with the dialogue in Season 1 of Netflix's The Witcher. The ordering of one scene is probably incorrect, and the description of another scene is also incorrect. We'll break down the inconsistencies in this video. In my prior video about the timelines, I gave you this timeline with the beige background. I'm going to amend it based on the official tweet by Netflix to have the dates match what was put in Netflix's official tweet, and also to put the dates where it's most favorable to the telling of the story. So instead of making Jaskier 5 when he meets Geralt, I make him 16, which is closest to what it seems like in the show. The big takeaways, which we all knew, was that Yennefer's timeline started the earliest, Geralt's timeline started the second earliest, and the latest was Ciri's. And the new tweet confirms my suspicion that everything in Ciri's timeline happened in 1263, and it confirms that we've got almost everyone on the same timeline by episodes 7 and 8, and of course Geralt and Yennefer's timeline converge by episode 5, where they share the screen together. But the dates that are problematic are 12/10, which is the date when they say that Yennefer's enchantments occurred. Specifically, they say Yen's body is transformed in 12/10. And in my previous video, I told you that the lore is that Yen was born in 1173. So that would put Yen at 37 at the time of her hysterectomy, and they took away her ability to reproduce. And they also got rid of her hunchback and made her beautiful. So even then, she's kind of at the limits of her fertility years for a normal human woman. It seems unlikely. I would think most women in medieval times were not giving birth in their late 30s. There were no fertility doctors. There was no IVF back then. But it seems plausible that she could give birth at that date and a slightly later date, but not likely. But as I said in my previous video, that she was probably closer to 50 than she was 30 when the enchantments occurred based on the dialogue within that episode. So I believe that Netflix has fudged the timeline here at 12/10 to make her fertility decision, her hysterectomy decision, seem like it was meaningful. But I'll run you the clip, which is right before she has her enchantments done, as she's being assigned to the court of Nilfgaard instead of Aedirn. They talk about some of the kings, and those kings' dates, specifically King Dagorad rules Cintra and Calanthe is a child between 1218 and 1232, and in episode 3 at minute 24:25, Fergus is the king of Nilfgaard and has not yet been deposed. So that puts the date range between 1218 and 1226. Thus, the date of 1210 is at least 8 to 16 years messed up. It had to happen between 1218 and 1226. Netflix's official timeline says it happened in 1210. thus messing up the historic timeline of the births and deaths and coronations of the kings and queens in the continent. All right, here's the clip.
Pliable, Princess.
Calanthe? Good luck with that.
Word is, she's even more stubborn than her father is.
How fares Nilfgaard?
King Fergus is proving to be an effective and excitable young king.
Horny, she means, and spending the kingdom's money on women as his people starve to death.
Fringilla will be in Nilfgaard by week's end. She will bring sanity and bread to the people.
So I can't emphasize how much I think that the timeline problem is one entirely of their own making. In particular, that Yen's timeline is messed up by 8 to 16 years, and that they're violating the book lore, and that they're violating the dates of all these kings and queens. They did not have to put references to King Fergus. They didn't have to put King Verfuril in the episode 3. They did not have to have King Fergus in there or talk about Calanthe's dad, Daggerad. They didn't have to do any of that. None of that. They totally made up Yennefer's backstory. That's totally Netflix's problem. That's totally on Lauren Hisrich and the writer's room at Netflix. And they chose that timeline, and they also chose not to Google, hey, what's the timeline for these people in The Witcher? You know, you Google it, one of the first results that comes up is fandom's wiki page for the whole timeline for the Witcher books, right? And it's going to tell you right away, 1173 is when Yennefer's born. It's going to tell you the dates of Daggerad, Queen Calanthe, Verfuril. All these people told them all the dates, and they could figure out that when they put those kings into that episode and said that that was who she was going to be assigned to, that she was almost 50, right? And retrospectively, they're trying to say, oh, well, that actually took place in 1210. Well, that messes up all the dates in the books. I thought you were basing it on the books. So you have your own alternative history of the world of the continent, and all these people went back in time. But that, of course, messes up all the timelines for all the kings and queens in the rest of the books. And it seems like they are trying to stick to the timeline of the books, but that writer's room of at least a half a dozen, probably a dozen writers, not a single writer used a Google machine and looked up these timelines. And that's ridiculous. That's really sad that they would put these people into dialogue and to try to place the episode at a point of time and then not be willing to stick with that point in time or not choose a dialogue that fits with their timeline. That they want to have Yennefer be fertile when she goes through the enchantments, but they also want to have King Verfuril. Nobody heard of King Verfuril until they mentioned him. You know, I think there are very few Witcher readers out there or Witcher game players that know who King Daggerad is or Fergus of Nilfgaard. That was I've read all the books, I've played all the games. The first time I had remembered them, they certainly didn't make an impression on me. But they were important figures in the show. And why did they put them in the show? Because they're sloppy writers. It was sloppy writing. It was terrible. So let's go to the second point. The second problem with the timeline, and that's the age of CIri. All right, so for episode 4, they put that at 1249. CIri's mother promises her to Geralt as a child of surprise. And then in 1263, Geralt returns to Sintra to claim CIri and save her from destiny, is imprisoned. That's not even a complete sentence. Okay, it's season 1, episode 7, 5 minutes and 34 seconds into the episode, Geralt says to Calanthe, I've been away 12 years. That's right before the queen imprisons him. He's got Mousak as a hostage. So right there, it's 1263. He says the last time he was in Sintra was 12 years prior. It was not when CIri was 2 or 1. It was when CIri was still in her mother's belly where her mother was not showing in 1249. But 1249 is 14 years from 1263, according to Witcher's time, the Netflix's timeline. So the writers at Netflix want us to believe that CIri is 14 or 13, but they had Geralt say that she's 12. Why would they do that? Sloppy writing. Bad writing. Here, I'll show you the clip so you can hear it from Geralt himself.
I warned you about coming back.
I've been away 12 years and I planned on staying that way till you sent 8 men to kill me.
So obviously, Netflix has had some indecision about whether they want CIri to be 12 or 14. Now, in the books, she's closer to 12, but maybe for reasons of their story, they want her to be 14. Like when they have the 4-year time jump and go to the saga, that they would like to have CIri be 18, so some of the saga is a little less cringy if she's 18 versus if she was 16. But they should have changed Geralt's dialogue so that it's been 14 years or 13 years since he's been there, not 12. And they didn't do that, obviously. So, I think it's just the writer's room, flying by the seat of their pants. Nobody checks anything. Nobody thinks ahead. They don't have a timeline worked out. It's not that it's secret, it's that they don't know what they're doing. All right, let's go to the other major problem with the timeline that they published on the 7th. Okay, it says, in 1249, episode 4, CIri's mother promises her to Geralt as a child surprise. This is obviously wrong. CIri's mother, Pavetta, did not promise CIri to Geralt as a child surprise. CIri's father, Duny, the hedgehog man, promised CIri to Geralt as a child surprise. This is just so sloppy for the timeline creators. And, it's just another instance where you think that the people at Netflix doing this stuff don't know what's going on. Because I think the writers knew that it was Duny that made the promise, not CIri's mother. But then they had somebody else who made the timeline, and nobody bothered to check. It was the father, not the mother, that said that. Fortunately, this is not a big plot problem. It just shows that the timeline creator, the official Netflix timeline creator, doesn't know what they're doing. Here's a clip where it's Duny, not Pavetta, who is unwittingly offering their daughter as a child surprise. By the way, this plays out very differently in the books. Geralt, instead of being flippant, is very specific with Duny and gives him many second chances to not make the offer that he does. But Duny insists upon it, and then Geralt does the child surprise on them.
You saved my life. I must repay you. You've proven yourself to be the kind of man who would do the same. I want nothing.
No, please. Please, Geralt of Rivia, do not feel like you're doing me a service. I cannot start a new life in the shadow of a life dead.
Fine. I claim the tradition as you have. The lore of surprise. Give me that which you already have, but do not know.
No! What have you done, Witcher?
Destiny can go.
Okay, so here's the fourth unforced error that the Netflix timeline puts on the writing. And it puts Yen Season 1, Episode 4, which must take place in 1236 to 1244, because Yen says that it's 3 decades that she started working for the King of Aedirn, Vilfarel. So 26 years from 1210 is 1236. 34 years from 1210 is 1244. And so it has to be at some point, that episode has to take place at some point between 1236 or 1244 based on her comment. But we know in 1267 in Blood of Elves, the book, Jaskier in Oxenford is described by Dijkstra as, I know you're almost 40 in dialogue. So most people put Jaskier's date of birth at 1229 based on that. But let's say that he's in his late 30s, so 36 to 39. Then that gives us a range for his date of birth. And so if it's 1236 and it's the lower end of the range of his age in 1267, then he's 5 years old. If he's at the upper end of his age and it's 1244, then he's 16-year-old in season 1, episode 2, which is supposed to come. The Jaskier episode 2, Geralt and Jaskier abducted by elves, is supposed to come before episode 4, when Yen and Queen Khalees of Lyria are facing the assassination attempt and using all those portals. Now, there's no reason for them. There was nothing in the show to indicate that Geralt and Jaskier's timeline came before, and it does them absolutely no favors whatsoever in putting Jaskier's episode 2 behind in the timeline, earlier in the timeline than Yen's episode 4 in the timeline. It does them all kinds of harm. It makes Jaskier too young relative to what he looks like, relative to what would be reasonable. You know, the earliest reasonable age you would think for Jaskier in this episode is 20. That he's started doing his career. He's actually left Oxenford. He studied at Oxenford. He is not, and he's not a teenager. He's not a boy, obviously. There's no reason for them to even say that this episode 2 came before Yen's episode 4. It's just they put it in this timeline here, and it shows that either the writers just really were not thinking this all through at all. All right, so after Netflix put out the timeline, one Twitter handle, this Lorena Eilhart at Lore Buffet, said, "For the stupid people that won't shut up," retweeting this. And the showrunner of Netflix, Lauren S. Histrich, replied, "Ha ha 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 ha, clap clap." So is she calling her viewers stupid when her show put out a timeline that has at least 4 errors in it, and saying that people are stupid because they're confused about the timeline? That her viewers are stupid people because her writers, her show screwed up the timeline? That's ridiculous. I lost a lot of respect for Lauren Histrich as a showrunner after her response to this timeline that Netflix put out. Another one of the toxic fans, Lakitia, at Lakitia on Twitter, called out Lauren Histrich for laughing at how stupid the fans are. She said, "Please don't make fun of the viewers who had trouble grasping the timelines. No need to laugh at them. I've loved your classy fandom approach so far. Please don't give it up." And at L. Histrich, Lauren S. Histrich, showrunner of the Netflix's The Witcher, said, "Fair enough and point taken. Honestly, I was just as excited to find someone else who liked the timelines as much as I did. That's been my own personal heartbreak to bear these past few weeks." It was too bad she didn't put her heartbreak into putting it out a reasonable timeline instead of one that's obviously wrong. Oh well, she'll go back to her bubble, and we will see what we get from season 2. There shouldn't be multiple timelines because there's no reason to create multiple timelines. They created multiple timelines in this series because they wanted to have CIri from episode 1. They wanted Yennefer from episode 1. I think overall the multiple timelines has been a failure, especially for CIri. Yen has been pretty strong because of the strong performances of Anya Shalatra. So I think Anya Shalatra's hit it out of the park this season, and having more of her was a big deal. Hopefully they could write more of her in season 2, perhaps even replacing Triss's part at Kaer Morhen with Anya Shalatra as being the mage at Kaer Morhen, overseeing CIri's training, because obviously Anna Schaefer was such a disaster this season. But of course, replacing Anna Schaefer, who's not a very good actress, wouldn't be the wokest thing to do, and that would go against our woke but poor timeline writing writer's room at Netflix's The Witcher. Subscribe to the Linus Wilson channel where we have all the news for The Witcher Netflix, and we cover tips and tricks for the games. You know, my personal overall take is I liked season 1. I thought it was an enjoyable thing. There's a lot of room for improvement, but I still gave it a very high rating. You can check out my rating here on this channel, and I'm looking forward to season 2. Subscribe. Bye-bye.
Destiny can go.